Hey everyone, so this is going to be a crafting stream, of course, with the goal being to create a plushie for my niece, one of them, and I'm going to try and show people from start to finish the process of crocheting a plushie. So let's go ahead and swap over. Okay, so here's the yarn we're going to be working with. It's 100% acrylic, which is what I prefer to use because it is machine washable. It holds up well to little kids being a bit rough with it, things like that. This particular one is not easy to see. Let me try. Oh, that didn't fix it much. Okay. This is Lion Brand Mandala Ombre. I've never said that right. It might be ombre. And as we can see, multiple colors. She loves rainbows. She once saw me making a blanket, a pair of baby blankets, and they were rainbow, and she asked me to make her one. Well, it turned out that the person that was having the twin babies, she gave them up for adoption the minute they were born. So she was the daughter of a coworker, so I didn't realize that was going to happen. But so I suddenly had these two baby blankets that had no one that they were for. So I gave one to my little niece, who adores it, and the other I gave to an elderly neighbor who is always needing lap blankets and throw blankets. So they still found homes, but not the homes that I had initially intended. I'm going to be using a 4.5 millimeter hook. That is too small for you guys to see. Okay. I generally use smaller hooks when making plushies because you want something that's going to have a nice tight weave, because you don't want to risk that the plushie will have big open holes that are going to show the stuffing. So, okay. Now, I tend to pull from the center when working with yarn, because it means that as you go, it just kind of collapses down. It also doesn't roll as much, but it does mean you sometimes pull out something that looks like this, and then you have to try and figure out where that central piece is. I'm going to demonstrate a few techniques as I work. I'm going to demonstrate what is called the magic loop, which is a way of starting a piece that is going to be round or circular, and you want the smallest entrance hole possible. This is... Okay, we're just going to turn this inside out. There we go. Okay, now that I have... This is called, by the way, yarn barf, which is how people refer to it, because it looks like the yarn threw up. Okay, so next question is, what am I going to be making? I don't know yet. With something like this, I'd normally do like a unicorn or a horse, something like that. But I just don't know. I'll figure it out as I go on. We're going to start, though, with something simple. We're going to do the legs. Okay, so first, I take my yarn and I wrap it around 2 fingers. And I just realized I wrapped it the wrong direction, so let's do that again. Let's see. Yeah, I do want it that way. Never mind. Okay. Now, this end is called the tail. No, I did put it the wrong way. Technical difficulties. Okay, there we go. Now I've got the tail where I want it. So, we insert our hook under the tail and catch it with our hook. Now, it went from outside the tail to through the tail, and we can now take our tail and go over. This is harder than you realize when you're trying to demonstrate it for someone, so, you know. Okay, so let's do that again. Okay, now, that's a yarn over is what we call that. Now we catch that and pull it through that little loop we made. And that is our starting stitch. Okay, now, this is also harder than it seems when you are working with an awkward angle to try and demonstrate. Okay, so now this is actually going to be the first stitch. And you guys really can't see that. I might need to get a different, better camera. Okay, so I pulled through the loop again, then yarned over, and then pulled both of those through that one stitch. Now we're going to do that again. People say that crochet and knitting are magic because you take a stick or a hook, or two sticks or a hook and some string, and you come up with something beautiful. Well, maybe, depending on what you're making. Okay, so now 2, then we do it again, 3, and okay, so now I know this yarn is splitty, which is going to make it a bit more fun to work with, well, fun in a sarcastic sense to work with. But that's okay. I've worked with splitty yarns before. It's doable. It's just a bit of a pain. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6. Now when making a plushie, I tend to start any legs, which is what we're doing right now as a leg, with 6 stitches. And then, this is why they call it a magic loop, by the way, because you grab this little tail that was left from the start, and you pull, and it pulls down into a nice, tidy little circle. Now we're going to be doing what's called rounds without joining. Because some people, they'll get to this point and then they'll do a stitch that is not part of this, and then they will use that stitch to join these two ends of the round together. Which, useful, but not doing that because I like to work in what's called continuous rounds, where you just keep going in a ever-growing circle. I did not grab, there they are. Let me grab a stitch marker because this is going to need it. Stitch markers are what they sound like. They are something, if you're doing crochet, I highly recommend using a lobster clasp like this, because at the first stitch of every round, you can attach that. Let's see. Now I've got to count back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this one right here is, you guys can't see that at all. This is my first stitch, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under each of the 2 parts of the V. I'm going to have to get y'all a better camera for doing this if I'm going to do it a lot. There we go. So now I've got my hook with 2 pieces of yarn. I'm going to yarn over and pull through both. That completes my first stitch of the new round. And when you're making a plushie, you're going to be doing something called increasing. So I'm going to mark that first stitch. There we go. And then I'm going to go right back into that same spot where I'd made my first stitch and pull through again, and that gives me a second stitch in that same stitch, which is called an increase. Now we're going to go ahead and do 2 stitches in every stitch all the way around, which will take it from 6 stitches to 12. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, here's the last stitch for the round. So 11 and 12. Now, you guys might have noticed we have a hole again. It opened back up. But we've still got that tail, and now that we've done our round, we can pull that tail nice and tight. And now look, we have no hole. No way to show that this was where we started, aside from knowing that was where we started. So, alright, now I'm going to show y'all the next trick that I use, which is how to get rid of that tail so it doesn't open up again. So remove our stitch marker. By the way, lovely little stitch marker I've got. I do not buy these as stitch markers initially. What I buy is bead charms. I've actually got 3 right here at my desk. And I just buy, basically they go on charm bracelets, but for me, they've got a lobster clasp, they're nice and small, and I use them as stitch markers. So, okay. And because in honor of us now having the trans tag, or, well, trans tag and the LGBTQIA plus tag, that's why I am making use of my rainbow heart. So, okay, now, to get rid of that tail, we're going to go ahead and this will be the first stitch of the next round. Now, we're going to pull that yarn tail over our loop, or our yarn. So when we pull, and then we're going to pull it back out. So when we pull this through, that yarn tail gets trapped under the loop. And 1. Alright, we're going to put our stitch marker back in. I need to turn this just a bit so y'all can see my hands better, because normally when I crochet I pull my hands back against my chest, so I am innately doing that. I'm trying to keep them where, see, clips right onto that, and now I know exactly where the first stitch of my round is. Okay, now you don't want to increase the same amount on every single round, because you'll end up with a ruffly texture, because it's going to get big too fast. So now we're going to increase on the first stitch, and again, we pull that yarn tail so we can stitch over it. Okay, so now there's 2. Now, we're going to not increase on the next one. So, we're going to increase every other stitch. So there's 3. 4. We're increasing again. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and last stitch for the round, which makes it 18. Now we can see that the colors are shifting now, and I know they look muddy on camera. They look pretty muddy here too. I'm looking forward to how the color changes are much slower later in the yarn. This is the end of the yarn where they had just cut it wherever, so it was mid-change when they swapped it. And that's why we've got the seemingly sudden, abrupt change, which is not that pretty. Thankfully, this is going to be the bottom of a foot of a plushie. So, all right, we remove our stitch marker, and there we go. I am going to leave this little end now. We're not going to sew that one or stitch that one in because it's going to be on the inside of the plushie anyway, so nobody's going to see it. And that way, if by some miracle this hole opens up again, let me try something real quick. Okay, so that doesn't make it that much more viewable. I think it's just going to be something we'll have to deal with. So. Eventually I'll get this thing sorted out. Okay. Alright, so we're leaving this. Now, we did every other stitch. Now we're going to switch to every third stitch where we increase. So, we've got 18 now, which means we're going to go, and every 4 stitches, one of those will be an increase, which is going to result in us having 24 at the end of this round. So, basically we're multiplying by 6 over and over. You don't even think about the math until you're doing it, generally, sometimes. By the way, I am not working from a pattern. I am very prone to making things up as I go. I do have a ton of patterns, and I will probably use one of those later, but I figure for the first plushie stream I'm doing, I'll just make it up as I go. Now, instead of doing it on the first stitch, we're going to do it in the second where we do our increase. So 1, 2, 3, and here's number 4. Okay, so there's that. Now, again, 5, 6, 7, 8, then 9, 10, 11, and here's 12. So, you can see now the colors are less muddied because we're moving to a single color instead of the color switch. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. As we get further into this, I will probably stop counting every single stitch out loud, and we'll just count them in my head so that I can talk about other things. I'm just doing this as we start because I want people to see what we're doing. So we're at 20, now 21, 22, 23, and as said, we're ending on 24. And something you might notice, this is you might notice there are kind of almost sharp corners everywhere we increased, and that if you pull it off right, you can actually do that on purpose, and you can make what are what I think they tend to be referred to as African patchwork animals, because basically you create a whole bunch of these and you make those corners very distinct by always increasing at the same spot. That's actually why I don't increase at the same spot, is to prevent that. But if you do it, you can then seam all of those pieces together, and instead of having a plushie that's made in continuous rounds like what I'm doing, you'll get a plushie that is made of these hexagon-shaped patches, and it looks really fascinating. It's very pretty when people do it. I just don't tend to do it because I don't like sewing that much. So the way that I'm doing this will limit the amount of sewing I have to do. Okay, so we increased by 1 every 4th stitch. Now we're going to switch to every 5th stitch. So, and we're going to go back to 1st stitch is where we increase. All right. So, a bit about my history with crochet. I have no idea if anyone would be interested in this, but what the heck. When I was about 8 years old, my mother decided that I should learn to crochet. I, of course, being a trans male who was being forced to live as a female, was not in the least interested in this because crochet was girly. And I didn't want to learn it. I had no interest in learning it. But my mother insisted. I got about as far as learning to crochet a single chain. And then I just refused to go any further. I never learned to increase, never learned to decrease. And finally my mother was like, well, if you're just not going to learn it, I'm going to give up on teaching you. Which, fine by me. I did keep that single chain that I crocheted for ages. You know what? I'm going to just, much as I'd prefer you guys not be staring at my chest, I know myself well enough to know I'm going to pull my hands back. So let's go ahead and, okay. But, so she eventually just gave up, and I went my merry way. Well, in 2014, I had been a stay-at-home parent for about 7 years. I was bored out of my skull, and I saw a particular plushie that I wanted to make for a niece of mine. However, it required crochet. The same niece, by the way, that this is going to be for. I didn't remember how to crochet. I hadn't done it in years. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, that's what I thought I was at. I hadn't done it in years. I had never learned to go past that initial thing. So I ended up looking up tutorials on how to crochet from YouTube. And it came back to me surprisingly fast, what I was doing. And then I started picking up the other things I needed to learn to make the plushie, like, increasing, joining in rounds, things like that. And I made a few other things first. My very first thing was a scarf that was literally, I crocheted I want to say 300 stitch long chain, and then I did a turn and just crocheted back down it and up and down the whole way. That was probably not the way that you're intended to make a scarf. I've seen plenty of other better ways to make one, but it worked, and I got a scarf made. And then I made a hat because I wanted to practice rounds. And then I made a friend of mine was, and he is, an amateur entomologist. And so he needed bug collecting, something to keep his bug collecting jars in. So I made him a pouch that had little pockets for the multiple little jars. And, it just kind of took off from there. And at this point, I now have a Etsy store where I sell plushies that I make. I do need to, at some point, get my Lightbox set up, get better pictures of the plushies I have. Now, you can see this has grown quite a bit as we've been working. Now, it's right now at 30 stitches. I think I'm going to take it up to either 42 or 48. Because I want this plushie, this is going to be the back legs, and I want it to have big, wide back legs because it's going to sit, and the wider back legs look kind of adorable on a plushie like that. I still haven't decided what it's going to be, though. I'm kind of leaning toward, like, I've made a donkey, I've made a hippo, I've made various unicorns and horses. I haven't decided yet, though. So we'll see. Okay. Now, we're going to be increasing every 6th stitch. Well, every 5 stitches here, but so I'm going to go with, again, the middle stitch of that set is where I'll increase. So there's 1, and of course we are adding our stitch marker. Stitch markers, by the way, are wonderful because if something happens and, say, a rampant toddler gets a hold of your crochet, I'll show you what I mean here in a minute, but they can't pull out your stitches past that stitch marker. 3, 4, 5, 6. So, now watch. Stops it right there. Now that isn't guaranteed. A particularly determined toddler could still pull it out, but it's not going to make it easy for them. And it's a lot less difficult to salvage than, say, if crochet is much less difficult to salvage if something like that happens than, say, knitting, where knitting, if your stitches come off your needles, you have to then pick up every single one, and it'll unravel horrifically, honestly. I love the look of knitting. I'm not good at knitting. I might try showing it off on stream. I don't like the look of knitted plushies, honestly, because to me they seem very flat and two-dimensional compared to the much rounder plushies that I can make with crochet. But knitting is beautiful for fabrics because it drapes really well. It just doesn't, in my view, hold up to the rigors of becoming a plushie very well. So that's why you will probably never see me knitting plushies. And again, I'm not good at knitting. Crochet comes much more naturally to me. So, okay. So there's 4, 5, and 6. All right. But yeah, crochet for me, once I got over the this is girly, I don't want to do this, and realized that crafting is a pursuit that anyone can enjoy, regardless of gender, it made my life much less boring. And, I don't make a ton in sales on Etsy, don't get me wrong. Some people can make their whole living selling on Etsy or crafting, things like that. But I'm not going to. I'm not particularly... I've got my primary job, which pays quite well, so I'm not reliant on my crafting to pay the bills, which is a big part of why I'm not going to be pushing for a Twitch affiliate or anything like that. There are people who make their living doing this stuff, and I do not want to detract from their viewership. It's why I stream the times that I do, because I want them to have the open spots, or the spots that they use. Let's see. So, I'm not sure when I'll have to end the stream today, just so you know. My D&D group is coming over for the first time since before the pandemic. To actually, well, no, we've had them over once when the pandemic was fairly new, before they actually locked things down here. Well, the soft lockdown, that was all we got. But they did come over once. I was not thrilled. We all wore masks. We socially distanced. But this is going to be the first time we can play without masks, because everybody in my gaming group is vaccinated. And one of my sons, or both of my sons, are not fully vaccinated. They've had their first shot because they opened it up for 12-year-olds in our area, but I'm going to have my son that is not fully vaccinated sit near me or sit near my spouse, so they are socially distanced from anyone who isn't. But it's going to be very good to have the group back together. And we've missed it a lot. One of my sons is like, you guys should... The one who won't be playing with us, because he does not do well with sitting down to do anything. So he has told us he wants us to stream it, and I explained that no, my streaming setup is not one that would lend itself to streaming a D&D game. And I would have to spend half the... I would have to edit out like half the stream anyway, because we're a bunch of perverts and we make sex jokes constantly, and that's not what my channel is about. I mean, me making them every now and then is one thing, and even then I don't do it a lot, but when we're all together as a group, we're all, yeah. Not that we're like swingers or anything like that. Okay, so we're at 36 stitches right now, by the way. So we're going to go up to 42, and then I'm going to get an idea of if I want to keep it that size or if I want to go up one more. I'm thinking, looking at it now, that 42 is going to be big enough. So, again, 2 stitches in the first stitch, and then we're going to increase every 6 stitches, so it'll be multiple of 7 when we're done. That's how we get 42. Okay. Well, 6 multiplied by 7, which I'm pretty sure is 42. So, okay. 1, 2, 3. The game we're going to be playing is one I've not played before. It is Hellboy, and I'm pleased. This should be interesting. My character for it is one that I came up with for a different game, only to realize that I had kind of screwed up in the making of that character, because it turned out that the game was for a White Wolf, mage slash vampire slash etc. etc. 20th edition, but we were supposed to make our characters as base humans, not as anything else, and I had not actually realized that, so I had made this character that is a red cap changeling, and I was super excited by the idea of getting to play this, only to be told by the GM after I'd created the character that, oh, you were supposed to just make a base human. Whatever your character becomes is going to depend on gameplay. Which I hate to say, but that kind of just spoiled the whole game for me, because I'd been super excited about this character, the backstory, etc., and oh, yay, you're not going to be able to play what you wanted. So I'm recycling the character for the Hellboy game. Recycling characters is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. I've done it plenty of times. I have one character who is... he has traveled with me through multiple games. He's been in X-Men, he's been in Mutants and Masterminds, he's been in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, all in various permutations. I've got a character that started out in World of Warcraft and then transferred over to Weird Wars. He has shown up in several other settings. Got a character that also started in World of Warcraft and then ended up in Deadlands, and then in Hell on Earth, because he was a Herald in Deadlands, so I could just move him to the next setting when we moved on. So, recycling characters is great. I see no shame whatsoever in doing so, and have done so multiple times. So, okay. Yeah, I think 42 is going to be as far as we go with the rounds. I'll show you guys one other trick before starting the next set of rounds after I finish this one. Because what we are going to do is, from here, we're not going to increase anymore. We are going to switch to just doing continuous rounds without the increases for a bit. Let's see, where was my last? That one. Now, if I've done everything right, because I haven't been counting, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Maybe I haven't done it right. No, I did. Okay. You should have the number of stitches for each repeat on your last round left when you get to the end of one repeat, because that way you can keep track of how many. So last time I was multiplying by 6 stitches, this time I'm multiplying by 7, so by having 6 stitches left, that meant that, yes, I was right where I needed to be on that repetition. Alright, so there we go. We now have 42 stitches. That'll be the base of the plushie's foot. So, now, for our next round, we're not increasing at all. But we're going to do something that is called... what is the term for it? It's a single loop stitch. So, now, let's see. That does not focus well. There are V's. Each of these makes a V. For this one, because we're going to be creating a ridge that will denote exactly where the foot becomes the edge, we're only going into the inside stitch, the one that's going to be in, because it's going to create a ridge of the other stitches on the base of the foot, and it'll become more visible once we complete. Sorry, having trouble with my lobster clasp. Okay, there we go. So, it's just one stitch around for the whole 42. This does lead to a slightly looser fabric in this one point because it's not going through all of the loops, which does mean it's going to be a weak point on our plushie. But it's also going to give us this very distinct, this is the bottom of the foot, this is the top of it. Look, I first started this, I did this the first time while making a plush Dalek, from Doctor Who. Because for that one, the pattern, because I was working with a pattern on that one, actually called for it as a way to make the base of the Dalek versus the sides of the Dalek. And so that's when I discovered that, oh, this is a thing I can do to make more distinct separations on plushies without having to just, crochet them in separate pieces and then sew them together. Which, again, not a fan of sewing things, which is hilarious when you think of how much I do end up sewing in various things, especially the masks. I need to work on sewing a mask today while we're doing D&D. We'll see if I can get any progress made. But yes, so we're going to have a very distinct separation of bottom of foot and the rest of the plushie because of doing this single loop. And then, let's see. And I'll probably, I was planning to end the stream around 1:30, but I can probably manage a few more rows before then. We will just have to see what happens with it, but I mean, if my gaming group doesn't show up until a bit later, I might be able to go a bit longer on stream. I know that my partner told them to show up around 1:30 because I said I would be streaming until then. Ugh, sorry. Nose is itchy because of allergies, but we'll just have to see where it goes from here. But I appreciate the fact that I can do my stream without interruption, because I was worried that that was going to happen when I was told, hey, Sunday we're getting together as a group to game. And I'm like, great, I stream on Sundays. Okay, so we have now reached the end of our round. And if we lay this out, now you notice the edges tried to curl up when I tried to lay it down. That's because we didn't increase. So if you don't increase, you're going to end up with something that curls up into a tube, basically. If you do increase, and you increase too much, you're going to end up with ruffly edges. This, because we're increasing that one additional row, one additional set of stitches per round, is a nice smooth fabric. And then it's only when we stopped increasing that we end up with it trying to curl up. Alright, so I've got time to do more. Stitch marker goes down. And, okay, now we did that row where we just did the single loop. Now we're back to going under both loops of the V, because we've already got our ridge. We don't need another one. You can, by the way, use those ridges to make... Really? Really? Hello, 109. Welcome to the stream. I'm working on a plushie for one of my nieces. This is going to be a who knows what. We have just finished. You're fine. Did you work out today already, or are you still going here in a few? I'm going around 3. Okay. So, by the way, don't forget, you still need to come back, pick up that package that was left at our house on accident. Anyhow, this is going to be a plushie for Little Olive. But I don't know yet what it's going to be. I'm making it up as I go. We've just done this is going to be the base of a foot. I did a row to finish off the rounds with just single loops, so we have this ridge that's going to make the base of the foot distinct from the leg itself. But it's 42 stitches around at this point, and now I'm increasing, or I'm not increasing at this point, and we'll start decreasing once I get a little further up the foot. But it's going to have these big chunky feet. So I'm also taking advantage of the new transgender and LGBTQIA plus tags for the stream, and I'm showing off my new rainbow heart stitch marker. So, okay. At this point in the rounds, I stopped counting because since I'm not increasing, it means that I can just stitch one stitch around for the whole 42 stitches. That makes it nice. Are you using any of the yarn that your sister dyed? And hey, the single stitch scarf is just fine. There is nothing wrong with a single stitch scarf. It still keeps you warm. That one that I made for you out of the wool Noro is single stitch. No harm there. Where you live, I'm betting the nearest yarn store is either Loops, which is the one about a mile north. Yeah, that if it's a fancy yarn store, that'd be Loops. Well, no, there's one right there in the farm, now that I think about it. Okay, Loops is where I used to go to my weekly knit nights before that all ended. So, Loops is great. Love the staff there. I still get their weekly newsletter letting me know what the latest is in. I just haven't been there in a while because, pandemic. The only actual yarn store that wasn't like a big box crafting store like Joann's or Michael's that I've been in for a while was one that was going out of business. Thankfully, it was not COVID that drove it out of business. It was just the owner has decided to retire, so she was closing it down. Um, I mean, they don't have a lot. Joann's and Michael's don't have a lot of non-acrylic yarns or non-cotton yarns, but given that I mostly make plushies for kids, acrylic is fine for me, so I don't mind them. The slipper socks I made myself over the winter, I got the yarn for those at, I want to say, Joann's. And it's pretty, and it's nice and warm, even though it's acrylic, so I don't mind that. Um, I don't go to Hobby Lobby for obvious reasons. The last time I was in one of those was because a commissioner wanted a particular yarn used for that project, and it turned out that Hobby Lobby was the only place locally that carried it. Yeah, if you're making scarves, I would say, non-acrylic is best. The Noro that I used when I made that scarf for you was non-acrylic. Thankfully, the commissioner, when I explained why I preferred not to go to Hobby Lobby, while I did go and get what she wanted there the first time, she let me use a substitute yarn for all of the follow-ups, which she about once a year buys a bunch of that particular item from me, because it's washcloths that are made from a particular yarn that is super scratchy, and I just make them to have like different designs on each one. I think I made some that were apples and some that were cat butts, because she loves the cat butt coasters that I make, and she buys those regularly too. But the cat butt coasters I use cotton yarn because it's nice and absorbent, so it saves her furniture. But okay. So I'd mentioned this before, how it was going to have this nice ridge because I'd done the single loop. You mean my Etsy store? I need, before I go advertising my Etsy store on my Twitch, I want to do a revamp of it, because basically I got myself a light box. I need to get better photographs of all of the items that are in the store using that light box. I just have to set it up somewhere. Finding space in the house is a bit of a premium, but once I have done that and gotten better photographs of everything, not using my previous fairly shitty camera phone, but once I've done that, I'll go ahead and revamp the store, and then I will start linking it to the Twitch. Keeping in mind that, like the custom commissioned plushies, I'm probably going to have to increase the amount of time that I have as my turnaround time on getting them made and shipped, because right now it is set to 2 weeks, and due to the fact that my day job has been super busy, I have not really had much time to crochet. That's part of why I started doing the crafting stream, was so that I would be forced to do something creative at least once a week, because I have just not been. Just no time, no energy. So this is ensuring that I do something creative, and hopefully, I'll find more time, but I also don't want my commissions to take off super busily, so that's another reason to be like, let's hold off on the linking to Etsy, or linking my Twitch to Etsy for at least a bit. Not that I have a ton of viewers, but I don't want it to risk it being suddenly I just can't keep up with demand or anything like that. So I'd like to have some more items already made and ready before I do that. Okay, so we've got this nice, almost basket-like, because of me having done that row where I was only working in one loop. That said, much as I love seeing you, I'm going to have to end the stream about now because the gaming group is coming over because all of the adults in it are now vaccinated. The twins, by the way, got their first shots last Monday and will be going back to get their next set in mid-June. After which they're super excited because 2 weeks after they will be fully vaccinated and everybody in our house will be fully vaccinated. You guys have a, let me go switch back to chatting. Just like with the coloring page, I'm going to make it a point to only work on this particular item during crafting stream. But I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of their week, and thank you so much for joining me today. And you guys will all be safe. Take care of each other. Have a good one. Bye.